Hey everyone, it's Dr. Jennifer Benjamin here with the Philadelphia Child and Family Therapy Training Center. Many of you have been following us in our 4-part series on our blog regarding the 4 family types. Understanding family types can be so helpful as a professional or a practitioner because how people relate within their family is typically how they will relate with professionals, how they'll turn towards a professional, turn away from a professional, how they will problem solve, take responsibility, manage challenging and supportive remarks. And so being able to learn about how structure and boundaries influence relationships will only bolster your development. Now, a lot of times people look at family types and they get overwhelmed. And, really the best way to work on learning about family types is to pick a family you're working with and start thinking about how their boundaries impact the way that they connect and relate to each other. Do they have boundaries that are very rigid? And so if they get crossed, it's no bueno. And it feels like there's distance between the caregiver and child with that boundary. Or is the boundary really diffuse, meaning that you don't really know where the caregiver starts and stops and the child starts and stops. And so when this happens, it impacts the way that people differentiate from each other, which is an important part of development. And then the other thing you want to think about for your families are the families under responding to the developmental needs, the emotional and mental needs of the child, or are they over responding? This oftentimes shows up in how families create independence and create dependence in the child. What you'll find is that when we get into these extremes of parenting, right? So if we're rigid and under responsive, we get this authoritarian parenting. Or if we're rigid and over responsive, we get embattlement in the parenting. And then opposing that, if we're diffuse and under responsive, we get an under-organized parental system. And then finally, if we're over responsive and diffuse, we get an enmeshed parental system. So when you look at these specific family types, you can identify what are some hallmarks. And as a clinician, you can prepare to enter the household in a way that you know where the induction might occur. So really what this takes us back to is, how are you seeing the old pattern informed by structure and boundaries, understanding where that pattern comes from, where's that structure coming from, where are those boundaries coming from. And for anybody listening, you are probably thinking, oh my gosh, Jen is talking about family assessment tools. And in fact, I am. You got me. And finally, how can we respond as a clinician in a way that doesn't further the existing old pattern, but actually creates deliberate practice of the new pattern? This becomes really key, right? If we, for example, have an enmeshed system and the caregivers are being over responsive in trying to promote the child, but there's not a lot of differentiation, this child can become aggressive, suicidal, obstinate, refusal, And, the child's trying to create some developmentally appropriate control, but the caregivers are over responding, overly attending to developmentally appropriate behaviors. So if I were to enter into a session with this family, I need to be prepared for how that shows up uniquely to this family, understand how the family culture, their rules, beliefs, and rituals are informing that. And I need to collaborate with those caregivers on how we can differentiate them from the child and have them practice meeting the child's developmental needs and parenting the child. So you can see how we could walk through every specific family type and think about ahead of time as the practitioner, how will I enter the session in a prepared way? And how do I have to be ready in order to create deliberate practice of the new pattern? And when I say deliberate practice, I actually mean role play the new pattern, have them do it. Talking will not get the family out of the old pattern. It helps them prepare, but we have to respond with deliberate practice. Just do a review. In order to build mastery in identifying family types, pick a family you're working with, an individual that you're working with who's embedded in the family, and go through seeing the structure and boundaries and use your family assessment tools and work on thinking about, is it rigid or diffuse? Is it under or over responsive? Define before you enter in how you'll be prepared to create agreements with the caregivers that you want to elevate their leadership, right? You want to help them co-discover this old pattern with you so you guys can see it. You can understand the new pattern that we're trying to promote, and then we can respond with deliberate practice. So I'm so glad you joined me today to hear a little bit about these 4 family types. And don't forget to check us out on the socials, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, y'all.